Think about how you feel at the end of a typical Tuesday. You haven't done any heavy lifting, you haven't run a marathon, you've mostly just sat in a chair, looking at screens, and yet you are completely physically exhausted. Neurologist Richard Sidgwick calls this the tyranny of attention. Our modern environment throws so many demands at us from so many different directions that we simply lack the mental bandwidth to process it all. The problem is our hardware. When a washing machine gets outdated, we replace it with a new model. The human brain doesn't get a clean redesign. Biology works through evolutionary accretion. When evolution finds a solution that keeps an animal alive, it keeps it and simply bolts new features onto the existing framework. Like adding rooms to an old house. It looks a bit funky, but it works. Your daily exhaustion represents the friction of running 21st century software on legacy Stone Age hardware. Take your working memory. This is your mental scratch pad, where you hold whatever you're focused on right now. It runs entirely on a physical cellular fuel called ATP, or adenine triphosphate. Because the brain operates on a strict energy budget, every single action costs you. Every thought you hold, every tab you switch, and every post you swipe past actively burns through that finite fuel supply. That bandwidth is incredibly narrow. Look at the famous Oscar fiasco where the wrong Best Picture was announced. The producer in charge of the envelopes took a photo and sent a tweet right when he should have been lining up the next winner. That single digital distraction flooded his working memory, leaving no capacity left for his actual job. Our narrow attention span evolved for a very specific environment. Our nervous system is essentially a highly sensitive change detector, designed to keep us alive on a mostly quiet, predictable savanna. Back then, the only changes were the weather and the constellations. Today, we are surrounded by artificial novelty, moving images, bright colors, and constant alerts, all aggressively bidding for our limited attention. Your brain is functioning exactly as it was built to, as a hypersensitive survival alarm. You are just trapped in a modern environment where the alarm never stops ringing. When you hear the sudden whoosh of a text message, your body reacts. That sound triggers the exact same biological threat response as hearing a twig snap in the prehistoric brush. We've trained ourselves through endless repetition. The screen lights up, we check it. We wait for someone to like our post, feeling anxious when we can't see our phone. It is a deeply ingrained Pavlovian reflex. To understand why this is so hard to fight, we have to look at the brain's two distinct reward circuits. First is the liking system, driven by opioids. It's a small network, and it is easily satisfied. When you eat a good meal, this system lights up, and then it tells you you're full. But then there is the wanting system. This dopamine-driven network is diffused widely throughout the brain's crevices, and unlike the first system, it is mathematically impossible to fully satiate. As soon as you get what you want, you immediately want something else. Tech platforms target this 14-40-minute day by focusing on your wanting system. Their interfaces keep you engaged through positive intermittent reinforcement. You scroll, and occasionally, on a totally unpredictable schedule, you get a good piece of news or a funny video. It's the exact same mechanic that drives a casino slot machine. The reward is infrequent enough to keep you pulling the lever. The infinite scroll leverages this lack of a satiety signal. Pairing unpredictable rewards with a system that never says enough creates a cycle of behavioral addiction. And this hijack doesn't stop when you finally put the phone down.
Even after you turn off the screen, the specific kind of light it emits continues to disrupt your cellular repair cycle. 3 billion years ago, life first evolved in the oceans. Blue light, which packs more energy into its short wavelengths than any other color, is the only light that penetrates deep ocean water. Because of that, our earliest photoreceptors evolved to interpret blue light as a highly specific signal, the arrival of morning. When you stare at a bright screen late at night, you are blasting those ancient photoreceptors with short wavelength blue light. You are chemically tricking your brain into thinking the sun is coming up, halting the natural onset of sleep. Look at this chart mapping out a healthy 90-minute sleep cycle. The line drops all the way down into stage 4, or deep slow-wave sleep. This exact stage is where the sleeping brain becomes highly active metabolically, beginning its physical repair work.
But here on the same chart, we see what happens with screen-induced sleep disruption. The cycle stutters. It never reaches stage 4, completely preventing that critical recovery period. Without slow-wave sleep, your brain cannot consolidate the memories you made that day, and it fails to clear out the toxic metabolic waste products that accumulate while you're awake. You cannot catch up on this lost repair time on the weekend. Shortchanging this specific biological process leaves your brain operating the next morning with the equivalent impairment of a legally drunk blood alcohol level. To protect your hardware, you have to establish tactical defenses. If you absolutely must use your phone at night, go into the settings, turn the brightness down by a factor of 40, and activate a heavy blue-yellow tritanopia filter to block those high-energy photons from hitting your retina. Beyond screen settings, you have to prioritize face-to-face interaction. Sitting with someone in real life triggers the release of oxytocin, a binding hormone that makes the interaction feel meaningful. Screens physically cannot transmit the signals required to release it. This biological gap is why video calls leave you so drained. When you stare at a grid of misaligned faces on a Zoom meeting, your brain burns immense amounts of ATP trying to figure out where to look and constantly monitoring how you appear on camera. To make matters worse, the audio is chopped into digital streams. In a physical room, our bodies rely on subtle cues and tone shifts to know when to speak. Digital sputtering destroys that natural cadence, forcing you to actively calculate when you can get a word in. We require chemical and visual synchrony to converse comfortably. Digital platforms actively scramble those inputs, turning a natural human behavior into an exhausting cognitive puzzle. But the most effective defense you have is a Dutch concept called niksen.
It translates simply to the art of doing nothing, and it acts as an immediate, voluntary circuit breaker for your overloaded brain. Practicing niksen involves stepping away from the screen to observe the physical world, looking up at buildings or watching branches move in the wind. Just 3 minutes of this physical pause stops the constant drain of ATP. It lowers your level of engagement enough to let the attention bank in your working memory begin to recharge. For over 3 billion years, the world was mostly quiet. A snapping twig was rare. Our brains evolved in that environment, and they still rely on long, uninterrupted periods of downtime to properly restore themselves. We've been trained to view silence as a boring emptiness that we need to fill with content. But silence is an essential biological nutrient, and in the digital age, we have to actively fight to consume it.